Welcome back to our video discussion session. This is Dr. Castleberry here with our digital media literacy class, and we are taking questions from John Lee. John asks or comments that, let's see, he asks, how difficult is it for common people to tell the difference between truth and manipulation? And, we might pivot that and have that follow-up question of what do we mean by common people, but say the average person, if that term still has resonance, like if it still represents some large faction. But the other question is that it is difficult for certain parties to tell the difference between truth and manipulation, or they say truth like factual information versus a manipulation of information. This gets at the heart of some terms and some relationships about media that many of you picked up on in this week's readings. Media is seductive, and we believe what we want to believe at times, right? Not just for entertainment, but there are these concepts like confirmation bias, right? That we seek out the kinds of information, the kinds of media that reinforce existing values or tell us what we want to hear, which can be a dangerous slippery slope, especially in a democracy. Have I now committed the argument of fallacy, right? By suggesting that. In fact, I did. I named it. It was a slippery slope fallacy. But we, there is this question about, what role does logic play in our society, and how valuable is it versus being entertained? And that is some food for thought for us. Let's see. Let's wait. Let's jump over to Ezel's questions here, and forgive me, still getting the names accurate. The Ezel Neal, and he asks, are there any comparison? Is there a comparison of the two? Asks about comparison between the bullseye and the SMCR models in Chapter 2 of Popular Culture. And so, in other words, how else can we think about variation there? And there's a similar question. Maybe if I could just piggyback the two, kind of merge the questions. Looking at Will's questions for this week, Will asks, he sets up his question. Wilbur Schramm and created his own model, the SMCR, which is more complex than Cloud Shannon's model. Compare and contrast these two, the SMCR with the bullseye model. And so basically these were, what we see in these two models is the evolution of what's commonly referred to as the communication model, the communication exchange model, where you have a sender sends a message, right, M, along what we call a channel. The message then goes to a receiver, R, and then that receiver, the initial model kind of stops there. But we have evolutions of that where new terminology has been added, including from these social scientists. So terms incorporated by Shannon include the channel, noise, right? Noise, also referred to as interference in some communication textbooks. This idea of that gets in the way of either hearing or receiving the message or accurately interpreting it. And so, that can be intentional or unintentional. It could be verbal or nonverbal noise, and it could also be internal or external, and we tease that out in some other sections. And if we had a ton more time, we would break it all down in the classroom setting. We could draw a nice, huge, messy map and make some real sense of that. But In short, in addition to the SMCR and bullseye models, you could look to Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model. And what Hall does there is he adds some variations in that not only the encoding process, but also especially in the decoding process. And those variations are worth considering. We explore that in some depth in our media culture and social influence class. That's why we consider Hall's essay in context there. So highly encourage that. It's a great variation on these two models. Will also asks about the difference in psychological versus sociological theories, and really you had your different camps of social scientists that were doing different kinds of work, and maybe sometimes they're interested in the cognitive side, the internal side, the psychological side. They're looking for not just effect; they might be exploring affect. And you've got sociologists, and they're exploring. They're exploring ideas about human responses in culture and across a number of spectrums, and ultimately, I guess luckily for the fields of not only communication studies but also media studies, we have the luxury and the hindsight to borrow from all these different camps. And it's why we are able to celebrate and kind of pride ourselves in being what we call interdisciplinary, and that we're very receptive and open to a lot of theories and methods that benefit both the social sciences and the humanities. And so we're very receptive to the links that we share with philosophy, with cultural studies, American studies, and so many other areas in the arts and the sciences. So that's a bit of a shorthand response to that. Hopefully, it provides some additional information to William there. Let me get to Chris Paschal's questions, and he asks some from the popular culture Danisi book as well. And Chris asks, what is the reason for reversing oppositions such as color? So in other words, if oppositional theory is something we are akin to in not only maybe everyday life, but just the way we sort of organize or structure our world and the stories we tell. Why change that up? What are we doing when with that kind of admixture? And so the book uses some clear-cut pop culture references like Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader in Star Wars, and how Darth Vader is, dressed in black and, has these evil machinations, right? And whereas Luke is dressed in white, he's adorned in white, and he's, youthful, young, innocent, and so on, at least initially. And so these are these story characters and archetypes escalate to the level of mythos because they rely so heavily on mythological archetypes of good versus evil, light versus dark. And the same can be said for a lot of other myths as well, as we see in the Danisi chapter. But something, maybe an example that of why we change or why we like that change could be seen in characters like Batman, right? Very popular. Batman has a tendency to dress in dark clothes, but yet he's the protector of the status quo, right? The Dark Knight, which is a playoff of words, right? A playoff of the White Knight, which would be this sort of mythological figure of chivalry and purity, and sanctity, and that sort of thing, right? Justice, bringer of justice. And so, there is something to that, and how Batman's colors are reversed, right? He's adorned in darker colors. Fear is his his modus operandi, his method, if you will. And he, to use some of the language Chris follows up with, he is ironically more popular in America, Batman, right? We prefer Batman. And above and beyond, so many of our other figures. So there's some interesting business going on there anytime we start to play with these archetypes. And I guess the stronger answer to Chris's question is this can be brought back to genre theory in general. All genres require a combination of imitation and innovation. And so they're imitating a certain form that's come before, a certain pattern, certain colors, certain behaviors, the things that are familiar that we like, that signal to us like that is that thing. And then to be of a high quality in any genre, you also are working to provide some kind of innovation, right? And so there's that imitation and innovation, or what we call convention, right? Genre conventions versus inventions. The things that are new to the genre, that spice it up, that add something. And so that is a way to think about why we might vary colors and whatnot. And this goes back to, I'll table that. One of the examples that was mentioned in our discussion board. Chris also asks, what are Greek dramatic style, Greek tragedy, the tradition of tragic irony, what's going on there? What are all these things? And basically in ancient Greece, we had two storytelling forms, right? There was sort of the epic and the tragic. And the epic was, this hero's journey, and say, when the hero ventures to the underworld or into some kind of a challenge, series of obstacles, and if they come out the other side unharmed and victorious, the story, it takes on epic form. However, if the hero does not return, or if they're somehow marked or scarred, there is a sense of tragedy, right, upon their return. And this is where we get this idea of you can never go home, because once you've gone on the journey and you come back, you're forever marked differently, and so you never view the village, right, quote unquote, quite the same again. And so there's a little bit of that kind of that tragic, and Danisi spells this out in the chapter. Tragedy provides what Aristotle argues is a bit of catharsis, right, where it allows us to kind of purge our own anguishes and feel a bit of catharsis or redemption, or alleviate those negative anxieties as a result. For example of tragic irony, I guess see Jon Snow in every season of Game of Thrones, right? Constantly just kind of walking tragic irony there. He's a bit of a literary trope, made manifest. Okay. What is pseudoculture? This is a really this is a short question, and it's really tricky. I wrestled with it quite a bit, Chris, not because I don't understand what the author's asking, but because there's a little bit of picking and prodding that we could do with that kind of language. What Danisi's getting at when he suggests that popular culture is pseudoculture is that it is closer to pop culture, as this series of artifacts, is much closer to what Jean Baudrillard calls a simulacrum, or simulacral material. And that is to say, popular culture is often a copy of a copy that reaches so far back we have forgotten its origin, right? A copy of a copy with no beginning. And so, this idea of replication, of repeated ideas, of genre cycles, this has, pop culture written all over it. And so it's part of a much longer conversation, but it is an important suggestion. And this might be why some scholars don't believe in studying popular culture. They say, hey, it's frivolous, it could be here today, gone tomorrow. But on the other hand, if we are adapting so much of our language, what we say, how we communicate, what we think about, and if all of this does revolve around popular culture, then wouldn't it be appropriate that we study it and think about it a little bit deeper?